Well, good morning, and welcome to today's session of the Church Online Communications Comprehensive. My name is Peter Frank, and I'll be leading this session today, just like I've been doing for the past 10 weeks now. This is the 11th session. It's crazy how fast that has gone. I apologize in advance. I'm already losing my voice today, so hopefully it'll last for the next 30, 45 minutes or so. It's been a busy week here at CPH. We're in our annual business planning, so lots of late nights and hard work working with the team. It's been a lot of fun, but I'm ready for it to be over. So this is a nice break in the process for me to come in and talk about social media in the church and what that means from a communication standpoint, what that means from a gospel sharing standpoint. So I'm very excited to be here. I thank you for joining us. Looks like we've got a good crowd already in place. Some of my screens aren't updating, so if you could let me know that you're tuning in and tell me where you're from, that'd be great to see that. I want to make sure that the chat is working. The screen is frozen in a very awkward angle for me, so there we go. Now it's moving. So I'd love to hear that you're here. We're going to get started in just a second, but before we do that, let me switch over to my contact screen. There you go. There is my contact information. Like it says there, I'm a senior marketing manager of church supplies here at Concordia Publishing House. My email address is probably the best way to get a hold of me, and I'd love to hear from you. Tell me how you're using social media. Tell me what other ways of communication you'd like to learn more about. We're coming up on the end of this comprehensive. We've only got 3 more weeks after this, and we've got some ideas on how to continue the conversation, but I'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like to hear more of. So go ahead and shoot me an email or give me a call. The phone numbers are listed there. All right, Linda, thanks for joining us from Grace in Henderson, Nevada. All right, so today we are talking about utilizing social media in the church to the fullest. And I say that to the fullest because I think most churches have some kind of social media strategy. Or maybe it's not a strategy, at least it's a presence. But we really want to expand on that and use it as best as we can. So the subtopic for today, the question that we hope to answer is, how do I share content that will keep my audience coming back? So our outline is to start off by a review of the content framework. We've talked about this several times. We've talked about it a lot these last 2 weeks, but we're going to go back to that and show where social media fits in. Talk about social media in communications, how that has changed over the last few years and become such an important part of it. We're going to go through some of the challenges of social media, especially in the church, and how we can overcome those challenges. Then we'll dig into why social media is important. We'll talk a little bit about the culture. We'll talk about the platform themselves and how they lend themselves to being a core part of communications in the church. Lastly, we'll actually look at how to use social media in the church. Obviously, that's why you're here. So we'll wrap up with that. That'll be the most extensive portion of today's presentation. So let's jump into reviewing the content framework. So our lengthy definition is that a content framework is an organized manner of distributing your content across all your communication channels to lead your audience through a defined journey map. Now, if you remember, the journey map is based on goals, your church goals, not necessarily your communication goals. And so it's taking somebody from being an unknown all the way to being an engaged member of your congregation. And what that looks like will be different for each church. Now, the content map, content framework will show you how to use these different channels to create movement in your audience from that one end all the way to from the beginning all the way to the end. So let's take a look at that. Oops, there we go. All right, so we talked a lot about websites, the home base. We did that 2 weeks ago back when I was in Chicago for the conference. We talked about websites and what that means, especially today from a conversion standpoint. And then last week we dug into your media empire, which is your blogs and your emails. And there's a great download that goes with that. If you haven't already got that, I'd highly encourage you to do that. We've got another great one for today we'll talk about as well. So those two are covered. The media empire, your long format content, provides people with enough information that by the time they're done, they're ready to convert. And that's when you drive them to your website and they convert. Convert meaning take a definite action, not mean a change of heart or anything like that. Outward actions that imply that they are moving along on your journey map. So now that we've figured out what a media empire is, the next step is to get people to that media empire. And that's where outposts come in. Outposts are about conversations. They're farther away from your home base. When you think about an outpost, you're looking out on the environment, in the surrounding area. Social media is fantastic for that because that is where people are spending their time. You can figure out actual individuals and have conversations with them. Figure out, maybe not be the best phrase, you can find actual individuals, have those conversations. There's other elements of the outposts within search and paid advertising. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming weeks, especially next week as we'll get into search. But today we're focused solely on social. So outposts, again, are short two-way communication. It's where you have these conversations with your audience. Now, when you think about that from a two-way communication standpoint, I'm not talking necessarily about like live dialogues, although social media certainly does allow you to do that. What I'm really referring to is this ability to put a message out there and see how your audience responds. So you can say something and then you'll either get comments or shares or reactions, likes, that kind of thing. So when I say two-way, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going back and forth the entire time, but you're certainly getting an understanding of your audience and they're getting an understanding with you. It opens yourself up for dialogues, and that's what's really great about social media. So back over. So again, short two-way communication. Let's talk about the different channels in social media, and we'll dig into these in a little bit more detail as we go, but I'm going to go through these 8 key social media channels that I think that churches need to be certainly aware of and also make a choice on whether that's going to be part of your strategy or not. So the first one, which I really don't think is a choice, is Facebook. Facebook is the king of social media, over 2 billion users, and growing every day. It's been around since 2004. It has really changed a lot in that time. If you're not familiar with the history, there's some great resources out there that you can read. You can watch The Social Network, the movie. It's not entirely accurate, but it's a fun story nonetheless. But as it started out, it was all about creating community in a college. It was formed by Mark Zuckerberg at Harvard, and that has grown to first to other colleges and then to open up to the public. And now it has become more than just a destination, but a platform for so many different things. Now, Facebook as a company has grown significantly, and their desire is to connect the world. And they have all these additional projects that are going on, including having solar-powered airplanes that will provide internet access to people in remote areas of the world. All of this goes into this idea of building communities. We'll talk about that specifically in a little while too, but Facebook is where you need to be. And as we did a poll of the people in the group, in the comprehensive, on our private group on Facebook, found out that the vast majority of churches that are represented in our group, they have a presence on Facebook, and that's great to see. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir about Facebook, but it's a core part of any social media strategy. And if you haven't started a Facebook page, then and page is just one of those things, but if you haven't gotten involved in Facebook, definitely start that. So I mentioned Facebook as a company is growing. One of the things that they have done in recent years is start to buy out other companies. And the first one that I'll talk about is Instagram. Now, Instagram started out as just a simple photo sharing application, and it provided filters, and it just made your photos look good. Kind of like a very light version of Photoshop for just the standard user. So Facebook saw that as a great opportunity and purchased them several years ago. And one of the things that I think was so brilliant about this move is that Facebook saw from an audience perspective that many of their younger users were not as engaged, and that they were seeing growth in older users. People like me in their 30s grew up with it in college. Like, we were at that right age in college, and so as we've grown, Facebook has just been natural for us. That's the older end of the millennials. But the younger end of the millennials were not as eager to be involved in that, and were looking for other outlets for community. And Instagram quickly popped up in that group, and Facebook swept in and made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and so they purchased Instagram. And it ended up being a real steal. Instagram has grown significantly in the last few years to be a primary social media vehicle for many people. So that's where Instagram's a lot of fun, and I'm not as well versed on Instagram as I am on Facebook. I'm certainly active on it, or I don't know if I even call it active. Here at Concordia, on the publishing house side, we have a very active social media. That's with our PR group, and they do just a fantastic job. In CTS, we're trying to get back into it. Now, what we've found in talking with our audience, and this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the comprehensive, most of our audience isn't actively involved on Instagram, and certainly not in connection with their work. As we talk about church management software, other things that the church would buy, most of you who are in the church outside of the communications group are not on Instagram. So that's why we haven't prioritized it, but we are prioritizing it more now because we need to become more well-versed. And that's the kind of strategy that I recommend for churches, that even if you're not on there right now, even if your audience isn't on there right now, to be sure to learn the capabilities of these applications. Now, I'm only on application number 2, so that'll be a little bit more challenging as we add more to the equation, but that's still a recommendation that I have. All right, next up is Twitter. Poor Twitter, the little bird. Twitter has gotten a bad reputation recently, especially in communication circles. Twitter's struggling to find their identity, and that's a funny thing to say for something that's been around for so long. It's not much older or much younger than Facebook. It's been around, I don't remember the exact date of when it started, but Twitter has not really evolved much in the last 5 years or so. Now, they still have a very strong and active user base. It's not like nothing's going on Twitter. But it hasn't really lent itself to new media like video or live video as much, even though they do allow those things. Twitter has been in the news a lot because of our president and his use of that platform, and many other celebrities as well. It's a great way to get an unfiltered opinion, commentary, viewpoints from celebrities who so often you hear about them through other media, through news media, who are putting everything through their filter, choosing what to share and what not to share. So those individuals who want to have a voice to the general public find Twitter to be a great way to do that. And again, going back to our president, you see how that has changed politics even. Now senators are being interviewed about what their thoughts are on tweets, and how weird is that? Like, that just seems, I'm fairly young. For me, social media has been a part of my a big part of my life because it's a good percentage of it, but for people who haven't been using social media for many years, it especially seems weird that our president and our Congress are talking about things on social media. But that's the way of the world, and Twitter is really great for that kind of thing because, again, it goes back to that unfiltered, unbiased viewpoint. It's a direct connection to anybody, and in a very public way, more so than these other channels, just because it's so easy to quickly access any hashtag, any handle, and see what people are saying. So from a church perspective, I don't see as much value in Twitter. And we'll as we go through some types of posts, there's a few that make sense. Now, if your audience is active on there, if you have success with Twitter, then certainly you should be on there. And that's that common theme. Where your audience is, there you should be also. but I'm not seeing that. I haven't seen many churches who have really found success in Twitter. So that's the third one. The next one, which I know will scare many people, is Snapchat. And I say scare because of how it got started. The idea behind Snapchat was that you could share something and then have it disappear. That's that ghost icon that they utilize, that it can be there for a little while and go away. And so, of course, in our in human beings' sinful nature, we corrupt everything because sin has corrupted us. And the beginning of Snapchat was all about, or at least had the reputation of being posting inappropriate pictures and having them disappear. Now, I think that's very much a stereotype of Snapchat. I think that you could take any of these social media platforms and find the worst of it and highlight that. And often that's what we hear. Now, I do think there's a lot of value in Snapchat on an individual basis because, again, there's a core part of the church's audience that is actively using Snapchat, and that is the teenagers and young adults, college students. So high school age, that's where they're spending their time. Instagram is still popular with them, but Snapchat is where more of them are active. So from a church level, there's not a lot that I think that is practical, especially for that audience to be posting things publicly because it disappears. You could put things in your stories, and stories are something that you'll see in other channels like Instagram and Facebook too. But I think where Snapchat really comes into play, and I've mentioned this before, is within youth ministry and being there for the youth in the place that they want to communicate. I've seen that done well when it's not forced. I've mentioned a friend of mine who's a pastor in Northern Illinois, and he's got a great way of using Snapchat to connect with the youth, and not in an invasive way. It's more on their terms than anything else. And so in talking with him several times about it, that's just really changed my opinion of the value in that. And so while I think there's value, not necessarily from a communication standpoint, but from a relationship standpoint. And so depending on what ministry you are in or others in your staff are in, that may be more or less appropriate. All right, moving on. The next one, YouTube. And I hesitate to put YouTube on here as social media because it's not by its nature a social network. You certainly you can have a profile, but the value is in the media, not in the communication, the interaction. But it is such an important part of video communication that I put that out there as having a social strategy. Now, we talked about this briefly last week as we looked at the media empire, and I think it fits there more. But as they try to figure out how they're going to connect YouTube to other things. When I say they, I mean Google. If you're not familiar with the fact that Google owns YouTube, you're several years behind. But this has been probably the best success that Google has had in this social media realm, even though it's not that social. Certainly media, though. And the connection that it has to other things and the attention that is given to YouTube, how many users are on there and actively consuming video, is why I include it as this part. Because as we talked before, that two-way communication is not always conversations. As you post things on YouTube, you'll receive subscribers and you'll receive likes and comments, and that's your audience conversing with you that this is content that they enjoy. And so I keep it on there because it is that two-way communication, and it is a very large percentage of viewership online is on YouTube. We'll talk about that some next week as we get into search engine optimization too, because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, second only to Google, and Google owns both of them. So that's an important part of reaching your audience in ways that are not necessarily social, but are certainly on the media side. So that is YouTube. Next up, we talk about LinkedIn. Now, I like LinkedIn a lot for a few different reasons. I like it because it has very much focused on the content on YouTube has not been corrupted as much as what you'll see in other ways. And as a marketer, I'm one of the ones who corrupts it. as we look at social media and you look at Facebook and you look at your news feed, there's a lot of ads and there's a lot of product placement and content that is not social as much as it is business-like. And as a marketer, I like that. On LinkedIn, there's no pretense about it. It's all about businesses, and it's about professional relationships. And I like that authenticity, that it's okay to talk about your product on there. It's okay to talk about your work on there, because that's all it is. Now, from a church perspective, LinkedIn may seem to not have as strong of a emphasis in your communication strategy, because churches are not businesses. Certainly they work as corporations or as business-like entities, but you're not selling a product, and that's okay. What I really like about LinkedIn from a church perspective is that in LinkedIn, more so than any of the other networks, it's okay to connect with people you don't know. If somebody friends you on Facebook that you don't know personally, you stop and think about it. And I stop and think about that too. There's people from this group that I've connected with on Facebook, and that's just fine. I'm not making it a public profile. Like, that's not where I share a lot of stuff. A lot of it's my pictures of my kids and our visits to Cracker Barrel, which is kind of my addiction. And I don't post those things on LinkedIn. I don't post a lot on LinkedIn, but I do look at it a lot to see what other businesses are doing. And from a church perspective of connecting with members, or maybe I should say from a church worker perspective, LinkedIn might be the best way to connect with that first-time visitor in a very non-invasive, kind of professional handshake kind of way. Like, I just want to know that I have a way to get in touch with you. I'm not trying to invade your personal life in any ways. Anyway, and that's what I like about LinkedIn. Another thing that I like about it is that you can grow your network within your industry being the church. If you are going to a district convention or you're going to any kind of conference and you meet people, that's the best way to just stay in touch with them at a very low-key level. So as much as I can, when I meet somebody in person, I then, hopefully that same day, try to connect with them on LinkedIn. Now, I don't do as good of a job of when I connect with people electronically doing that on LinkedIn too, which just a personal thing. I don't know why I don't prioritize that. But certainly in person, it's a great way to just say, okay, now we've got our each other's contact information. If we ever need anything, we can reach out. So that's what I like about LinkedIn. Probably talked about that too much. The next one is a guilty pleasure, Pinterest. My wife kind of laughs at how I use Pinterest because stereotypically, Pinterest is used for things that are certainly not within my realm of expertise, like cooking or fashion or anything that is stereotypically seen as more female-based. And I say that because there's a lot of men active on Pinterest. Now, my Pinterest boards focus on business things like design elements, like journey maps. Many of the ideas that I've shared, or at least design elements that I have shared, have come from Pinterest, and there's a lot of great things on there. So from a church perspective, there's probably not as much on Pinterest, or much of an opportunity on Pinterest from a community perspective, from that two-way communication, but it is a great platform for sharing creative things. So especially as you network with other churches. So VBS is a great example, and I know that our VBS team does quite a bit on Pinterest. If you've got craft ideas or snack ideas, sharing that on Pinterest is a great way to provide help to other churches. And in the same way, you can go on Pinterest and get ideas. So from a personal standpoint, there's a lot of value there. From a church standpoint, I don't know if your church needs to have a Pinterest page, Pinterest boards, anything like that. But for you personally, for getting ideas, it's great. All right, the last one on here, the lonely stepchild, is Google Plus, and Google Plus has changed quite a bit. I talk about it so little, even just saying that makes me question if I'm saying it right. It's a Google's failed attempt at competing with Facebook, and so they've changed the platform. And I haven't stayed in touch with what they're doing. It's not popular. It's not an active community. There are some segments of the population that really appreciate Google Plus, and often the joke is it's Google employees. What I like about Google Plus is that it's directly tied to their search engine. And if you can find a way to automatically post on it, it's really going to help you more from an SEO perspective, search engine optimization perspective, than anything else. It is certainly not a place that I recommend you spend much time. And there are plenty of automation systems, so you could set it up and not really touch it. Certainly you'll want to get notifications if somebody is interacting there. But I put that out there because it still has some importance from search and visibility. But from a community perspective, definitely not. So those are the 8 key social media networks that I think that churches should be aware of, understand the benefits of them, and how to use them. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail now. But I wanted to throw these out there just so that you have the broad context of where we're headed. So let's get into social media in terms of communication. So it used to be, from a communication standpoint, that the biggest limiting factor was money. And so much of this is just paid advertising. And that's why churches don't like to get into advertising, because money, when it is spent on traditional media channels, seems almost like a waste. You know, most churches, I won't say all, but most churches don't have the budget to afford television commercials or radio ads or billboards or print pieces that get mailed out and have to pay for postage. Like, all of that is tied directly to money, and churches certainly don't have an excess of that. As digital media has changed and things like Google AdWords came into play, then the next big factor was not so much money, but time. In that these things, like Google AdWords, is a fantastic tool for ministries. People search things all the time. And from that perspective, Google AdWords is good. But from a learning perspective, it takes a lot of time and also still money to get up and running. And so those were the key resources that limited church and limited how communications could be expanded. Well, now, as things happened, the biggest asset, as things have changed in media, especially with the emergence of social media, now the biggest thing that you need to pay attention to is attention. And I struggle with this because I want to make a bold statement that attention is the new currency. No longer is time or money as important as your audience's attention. And I put a second slide to make that even. That is my second slide that shows that attention is just so important. It's the new currency in that what you're trying to do is compete against everything else that takes your audience's attention away from you, from the church, from the message that you're trying to get across. Because attention now can be spent on things like family photos, or cat videos, or memes, or YouTube videos about the silliest things, and that's all competing against everything really. I mean, when you think about how far away you might be from your phone on a daily basis, and I have my phone right here, it's plugged in, I never go more than a few feet away, and there's so much here that can take away my attention. Whether it's emails or whether it's searching for things, directions, I get notifications if there's traffic. All of this stuff is great and beneficial to me as an individual, as a consumer, but for you as a person in the communications, especially in communications in the church, it just makes it that much more challenging to get your message to your audience. And so as we talk about any kind of communications, we're focusing on attention. Now, attention is key in social media because that is where people are putting their attention. Now, we're going to get into the challenges of social media and why I think that churches often struggle to get their social media strategy up and running. So, first, for many people, it's still uncomfortable. If you did not grow up with social media, it is a strange thing with a steep learning curve. Now, if you have grown up with it, if you're in your 20s or 30s, and it was a thing that started when you were in college, just like it was for me, it's not as much uncomfortable as it is uncomfortable figuring out how to take it from my personal life to my work life. Because when we start with social media, it's generally not from a work perspective. It's certainly not from a church perspective to start. It just becomes a daily life thing. And so to then bring it into your work, to bring it into the church, is a little bit uncomfortable because it feels unnatural. Another thing is that it's constantly changing. We'll talk about time in just a minute. But because it's constantly changing, you always feel a little bit behind, or at least I do. And not having enough time to stay up to date makes you feel like you're going to be even more left behind. And again, I'm speaking from a personal perspective. So that's that third thing in there, the challenge that it takes time. Now, this idea of time and lacking time is something that I struggle with, because more so than any other communication method, social media is quick. Like, it takes only seconds to go and post a message on Facebook. And I say that having seen my daughter almost do that accidentally on my wife's phone, or maybe actually going through with it. Like, it doesn't take long to make a post, but it can take long to actually create a post. It can take some time to actually see the results of it. And so in the blog post today, I talk a lot about that, but is it really a lack of time, or maybe is it a lack of patience of seeing results? Or maybe is it a lack of creativity in knowing what to post? The aspect of time is obviously relative. We have limited time during our day. How we spend our time is most often up to us. Now, I understand that we all have bosses, and even in the church, you report to people. If you're not reporting directly to somebody on a church staff, you certainly are reporting to the church members at large and have an obligation to do the things that best serve the church. So posting on social media can seem like it's maybe frivolous or more fun and games than anything else. And so when you look at the things that you have to do in the church, whether it is the newsletter or the bulletin, or getting word out to the local media about your upcoming community event, like, those things are bigger in nature, and therefore they seem more important and push out things like social media. And so it's easy to think that you don't have enough time for social media because of those other factors. It's constantly changing. You have to learn it. But as you are posting things, you may not get the reaction, and so you don't think it's working. You want the best possible post. And this idea of something going viral, I think, is a big stigma that affects us personally. When you look and you see other posts of stupid things getting thousands or millions of views, and then you see your church posts that might be carrying the gospel message getting single digits on reactions, maybe not getting any shares whatsoever, you start to get discouraged and think, okay, well, I wasn't creative enough in my post. And that's not the case. It really comes down to patience and understanding that as you are trying to win your audience's attention, that's not going to happen overnight. They need to understand that you're going to be there regularly, and that's building up trust. And we're going to get into that in just a few moments. Okay, so why is social media important? Your audience is there. And this is the one that I put the extra emphasis on. I apologize. There's the bold. Your audience is there. That is why you need to place an importance on social media, because if attention is the currency and their attention is on social media, well, then you need to be there. So when we talk about phones and how important they are to our day-to-day life, it's a fun exercise to see what do you have on your phone. What does your audience have on your phone? Maybe at lunch hour, or maybe you're at your own lunch hour, ask everybody to pull out their phone and say, what's on your home screen? We did this practice at CPH a little while ago, and it was fun to just hold up everybody's phone and say, here's what's on there. So on my home screen, I have 4 folders, work, entertainment, personal, social, and then I have things like my grocery app, news and weather, Chrome, Starbucks to feed my coffee addiction. I have the church online communication group on here, so I can quickly access that on Facebook, and then things like photos and flashlights. For me, it's very practical stuff, and I center everything around where my fingers go, so I can get the things that are most that I commonly use the most as close to my thumb as possible. Now, what's fun about that is that it gives you an insight into your audience, and it's a fun little activity. We shared all of ours. We took screenshots and shared it with the team, and it was fun seeing how people's home screens match their personalities. Well, you can take a look at some trends, and that we'll shift back here. If you go to like iTunes and see what is featured prominently on there, I did this last night. There's various social networking things, and so like the one Saraha is brand new to me. It says social networking. It's much more work-based. As I was looking into that last night, that surprised me that was number 1. But then there's some of the old standards. There's YouTube, there's Instagram, there's Snapchat, there's Messenger, which is part of Facebook. There's the actual Facebook app, Bitmoji, which also ties into social media, and then a few practical tools like Google Maps and Spotify. But it's fun to see, and it's of course obvious that social media is going to be at the top because they have so many users, Facebook having 2 billion. But I think the thing that's important to remember is that most people only spend time in a handful of apps. And so if these apps are all social, there's value in having a church app. That's a different discussion for a different time. But know that it's hard to compete with these other very popular apps, so you might as well join it because that's where your audience is. Take a look at Google Play as well, and of course their Messenger, Snapchat, Instagram, then Wish, a shopping app, and then Facebook. So 4 of the top 5 are very tied into social. Now you'll notice I didn't talk about Messenger as much, or at all actually, in the presentation of the 8. I see that as part of Facebook. It is a separate app. It's more text messaging. There's a few other services like that. We're not going to get into that as much today. That is a very different discussion for a different time. I certainly think has value for churches, but we're talking more about the social side of things from an entity standpoint. So let's talk about Facebook a little bit more. At their recent F8 conference, their developer conference, they talked about the things that they are working on from a social standpoint in a development roadmap. And you can see Facebook itself is what they call the ecosystem. That's the platform everything's based off of. Within Facebook, they have video and search and groups, but then there's also these separate apps, Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram. These are products that they own. And then moving forward, actually this may not be the most recent one because it's the old Instagram logo. So I think I pulled the wrong image. It doesn't matter. The points are still valid. They're focusing on things like connectivity and AI, virtual reality and augmented reality. That's where technology is headed. Connectivity and being part of the Internet of Things, like connecting Facebook to your dishwasher, seems very odd. But that's where things are headed, and it's all about creating seamless integration across these different apps. Well, social media is still that main platform, and so you don't want to get left behind as things get into augmented reality and virtual reality, artificial intelligence, all that. Those are going to be directly connected to social media. And so even if you're not thinking about right now, even if you're not having much engagement on social media right now, the importance of social media to these future technologies is key. All right, well, as you can see, I like talking about this. There's a lot of different directions we can take this. I'm running too long on time, so I'm going to move forward a little bit more. Let's talk about how to use social media in the church. First off, if you haven't please start. Please start today. Please get comfortable with it. Doesn't mean you have to go out and join all of the different platforms, but at least start using it in your personal life and set something up for your church just so you can try it. Because you won't necessarily know what your audience will like until you start trying some different posts out and seeing how they react. And the beautiful thing about social media is that it's so quick that if you screw up or if you just post something that's not very appealing to your audience, it's easily forgotten within minutes, if not seconds. Now, in some ways, this has the bad side that says, I put all this time into this post and nobody remembers it a day later. Well, that's the nature of social media, which is one of the reasons why it's better to just try things and get it out there than to try to craft the perfect post, knowing that it's only going to be visible in news feeds for so long. So that's a little bit of advice for you, or maybe encouragement is a better word. But also, I do want you to focus on why you're doing this. The end goal is not to have a large social media following. The end goal is not to be a social media expert. The end goal for us is to share the gospel with the children of God who have not heard it or are not hearing it regularly. That's what we at the church are here for, is to share that gospel message. Social media is a means of doing it. And it's easily distorted, just like so many other things, to change your perspective on why you're doing it. Keep that focus on why you're here, is to share the gospel. And knowing that people's attention is on social media, bringing the gospel to where they're at is key. And that goes back to so far into how we are called to share God's word. All right. Now, the next section, I've got 5 areas of posts, 5 types of posts, 5 goals for individual posts that I hope will be practical for you as you get into social media in a strategy. For me, it's helpful as I think about these things is if I struggle with what to share, I can look at these different categories and say, okay, well, how about something along these lines today? And let's look at those. Okay, so first off, typical communications, especially in the church, is about sharing information. So the who, what, where, when, why, maybe the how, I left out how, of the different things going on at your church. This is very much about the same thing you do in newsletters or bulletins or bulletin boards. In some ways, it's similar to your website. What's great about social media is that you don't have to put all the details because you can link to your blog, your media empire. And so you can get this information out that's very practical, that's necessary to share, and social media puts it in people's attention, in their line of sight, if you will. So the things that I think are great for this, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and you'll see Facebook shows up a lot, but especially within Twitter and LinkedIn, these are much more information-based, practical. Here's my event. Here's when it is. I hope you can join us. Here's the Bible study. To learn more, visit our blog. You know, these are typical types of posts, and I'm sure you see many of them on a daily basis. This is also similar for emails. So what I want to caution you is to not make this be your only strategy for social media. If your only goal is to get information out there, there's other ways of doing it that are probably less invasive into the personal lives of your members. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still do this. I just caution you to not do it as your only thing and not overdo it, because then people will not want to hear it. If all you're ever sharing is information, they know where to find that information. They can go to your blog. They can go to your website, your calendar to get this stuff. So don't overuse that. But it's certainly there's value there. Next up is community, and this one is a key. You are dealing with what I call the pick or it didn't happen generation. That's a phrase used on social media to prove that something happened. If you take a picture, then everybody knows it's real and authentic, and we'll get into that as we talk about another one here. But pictures of people help build community in that you are seeing the members of the congregation, like actually seeing their pictures, seeing the events. Video is a great way to share yourself with other people, share your church with people. And so by easily sharing media into the attention span of your audience, it helps build that connection, build that community with them when they have this real life view into the church. And maybe they're actively attending every Sunday and going to Bible study, but this can show you the things that they can't be at. Or for the people who can't make it to your church, like shut-ins or other people who maybe they're traveling. I used to travel all the time, and I just couldn't physically be at my church. And so I started losing that connection, that community, just because I wasn't there. It wasn't that I left the membership, just that time of my life, I couldn't be there regularly. So that's where social media can help build that community. The other thing that I like about it, and is often not thought of, is community isn't just in the post. It's also in the reactions, in the comments and the share section. I know for me, on my church's Facebook page, sometimes people will comment and I'll see, oh, there's that's who that person is. I put the face and the name together. I don't attend that services the same as they do or something like that. It does build that community, like, okay, now I know who you are. Or as they comment or they react, you can say, okay, these are the things that they're interested in. And so it helps you understand, even within the church, helps each other understand who is part of that community. So the platforms that I recommend for that, Facebook, and I think Facebook shows up on all of these. Facebook is key, but also Instagram, and to a lesser extent, Snapchat. And I say lesser extent only because from a church perspective, it's not as important as it is from a one-on-one individual perspective. But those are all optimized for sharing media, sharing videos around community. Others like LinkedIn and Pinterest YouTube and Pinterest certainly are about media, but it's less about community. Okay, the next one is education. And education has been a core part of church history and also the present. As you think about what goes on in the church, educating people on Scripture, telling the story of God, and story not in a fictional sense, but in relaying this history. It's like family stories. You know, you pass them on from generation to generation. That's what we're called to do with the gospel message. And so we do that through Bible studies and small group discussions, and sermons are often about educating people on what they believe and why they believe it from Scripture. Well, social media allows you to do that in very different ways than ever before, because you're no longer bound by time or place. Attending a Bible study doesn't have to be an in-person event. Participating in a worship service can be done from a hospital room because you broke your leg and you can't get there. It could be done from a nursing home. But this idea of education and providing opportunities for people to learn is part of what we as a church already do. Now we have new ways of doing it. And so Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Google+, those are places where it's very natural to put these kind of learning, maybe longer format videos or posts to train people and educate them on Scripture. I put Google Plus on there just from a search engine perspective, but even on LinkedIn, that idea of sharing, maybe not as much, I hate to use the word dry, but less interactive, more monologue than dialogue. Those are great channels for doing that. And as you can see, that's what this course is all about, is education and how we're using it here at CTS to educate on communication. It's a little bit different than what you'll use it for, but it's that same idea. So education is another way to use, another category of social media posts. Trust, and this may sound a little weird, but building trust, social media is a great way to do that. Now, what it comes down to is people trust you when they feel like they know you, when there's, you are what you say you are, and so there's no substitute for authenticity, is what I put. It means that social media allows you to show the real you, and I say that being here on live video. You can see that I'm in my office. You can see when people walk by. That's all real. I'm not editing that out. If I stumble over my words, you hear that. If I have to sneeze or cough, you hear that too. Like, it's all just real. And that's what social media allows us to do. Several years ago, with the emergence of reality TV, it became very popular because it was this idea of not scripted, but real life. Now, we all know now how not real social media, not real reality TV is, that there's more scripting than we were ever led to believe. And I think you probably could have assumed that from the beginning too. But in social media now, you really do get to be true. Live video and how that's taken off is really what that comes down to, is that I can come out here and talk live to you, see your feedback, and respond to you so that you know this is live, and you're getting the real me. The same in the church. Now, I like this because it's the easiest type of post. And I put easiest in that it's the least time consuming. It's not easy from a nerve perspective. I know so many people, myself included, who are uncomfortable being on live video. And that's just natural, because it's putting our mistakes out there for people to see without a chance for us to take it back. If I say the wrong thing, you're going to hear it whether I want you to or not. If you're watching, you're going to hear it. But it's easy in that you're not spending that post-production time editing it or tweaking it or getting it just right. You just put it out there and you do it and you're done. And the amount of time it takes you to do it is the amount of time you're spending on it. Now, sure, you may want to have some preparation. Clearly, I put some preparation into the PowerPoint. But for day-to-day life in the church, just sharing what's going on is all about just being real and genuine, and that's what your audience are looking for. That'll build trust. And I think with the outside secular world, there's a trust issue with the church. You'll hear people don't attend church because there's so many hypocrites in the church. And there are. We're all hypocrites. We're all sinners. We all tend to portray ourselves as something better than we are. That's our sinful nature. Well, you can break down some of that barrier created by hypocrisy by just being real and genuine. And so if you as a pastor don't always wear your collar, well, show that. If the collar will put up this divide for some people because they have this different understanding of what it means. So it's okay to be there in a t-shirt. If you're at the church picnic and you're dressed casually and you're talking to people, go ahead and post something from there. Show that you're a real human being. We all know you are. This just gives you a chance to do that. And so there's lots of different examples that we can get into. I'm going to move forward. Trust is just key. And the networks that I encourage you to do that in, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I left Snapchat out because from a church perspective, it doesn't build trust in the church. It certainly builds trust in individuals. But YouTube and LinkedIn are all great places to post just real content, real things about you as a church. All right, the last one on here is inspiration. And in the church, there is no shortage of inspirational content. And the difference between our content and others is that our content points to the ultimate inspiration, which is the gospel message. Now, you'll see a lot of things on there that are inspirational, like inspirational speeches, like TED Talks or quotes, usually on a nice photograph. That's all very well received. It's easy to digest and share it and pass those happy thoughts on to somebody else. And that's all fine and good. In the church, though, our inspiration comes from the gospel, from the Holy Spirit. And what a great thing to be inspired by, that saving grace that we receive through the power of the Holy Spirit and baptism. And that's the kind of things that we can share. And those stories of faith that are not pointing to us, but are pointing to the work of the Lord in our lives. That is what people love to see coming from the church. And so if you have somebody who has recently joined the church, has become a Christian, that the Lord has worked in their hearts and brought them to faith, share those stories. If you have kids who have been baptized, it's always fun at our school when we'll get like a 6 or 7 year old who wants to be baptized. Like, that's exciting. Share those stories. Of course, with kids, you got to be careful on permissions and being able to share photos. All that stuff aside, look for these opportunities to share the inspirational stories of the gospel in your church, and social media is the place to do that. So I could talk about this all day. The things that are the channels that you should be sharing those inspirational stories: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and to a lesser extent Pinterest and Google+. But anywhere that you can share this exciting media about the stories of your church, it could go in other places too. There's really no limit. These are just the best platforms for that, where that kind of content works real well. All right, I have talked long enough. Let's wrap this up. In summary, social media is all about attention. It's all about the attention of your audience. And as we talked, attention is the new currency. That's what you're going after. That's what you're trading for. You're trading people's attention. And the church still has the greatest content and the most important things that anybody can spend their attention on, the gospel message. And for you as a communicator in the church, remember, trying is always better than perfecting, especially in social media when it's fast and the next thing comes along very quickly. Just get going. Just start it and don't worry about perfecting it. So as I look over here, I'm not seeing any questions or comments. I don't know if that's because my connection's not showing, so I'll take a look at that afterwards. But let me give you a few resources to get going with social media. So, oops, wrong direction. If you haven't already been to our blog, our post today is on the same topic, and I go in a little bit more depth in some of these areas. But what I really want to highlight is the free download at the bottom. It's 100 ideas for social media posts. Now let me switch over to the screen here. There's my browser. So that is the blog post for this week, and if you go all the way down to the bottom of it, you'll see this download PDF. When you go here, there's a short form. Depending on how much you filled out before, it'll remember that. And then we have this free download. And in this download, it's divided up by those key categories: 100 ideas for social media posts in the church. And like there we have community and information, inspiration. These were compiled by my team. It's wonderful to have a great team who can help me out. As I was working on business plans, they were putting this together, and there's a lot of great ideas there. And the reason we did that was just because sometimes getting started is the hardest thing. That creativity is the hardest thing, and the thing that prevents you from getting started. So we want to remove that barrier. Obviously, not all of these ideas are going to apply in your setting, and that's okay. They should spark other ideas too. So go ahead and get that download. The last thing I want to show is if you're looking for more information on social media, the Resource Center, resources.concordiatechnology.org, there's a section on social media there. That's all from CTS, and these are different blog posts or downloadable things that we've shared before. So go to resources.concordiatechnology.org. You can also get that from our homepage, and go to communication and social media, and you'll see a lot of other things on there, things that we haven't even touched on today. All right, if you haven't, let me switch back here. Oops. Sorry, a lot of jumping back and forth. I'm a little click happy right now. Okay, if you haven't already joined the Church Online Communications Comprehensive Facebook group, I encourage you to do so. There's lots of great information there, and I'll be sharing all of the things from our session later on today. I hope you join us next week. We shift gears a little bit and talk about search engine optimization. And I will be joined by a special guest from my team, Erica. She is our copywriter and has a good understanding of search engine optimization, writing for the web, the kind of things to include. So she'll be joining me next week. And that's the one of the final 3 sessions. We're in the home stretch. The week after next, we'll talk about saving time in your online communications. We'll talk about some different campaign templates that you can implement in your church communications. And finally, how do you roll this out? How do you share your excitement about your communication strategy with your church staff, with your members and volunteers? I just saw a bunch of questions came across. Let's see. I do have a few minutes. I can address those. The fun thing about social media and new media in general as we get into video is just how is that learning curve that we talked about, that sometimes it takes a while to learn. And for me, at least, the challenge that I've had in this course has been getting comments at an appropriate time. So David said, maybe I missed this, but what restrictions are there about sharing pictures of people on social media? Do we need their permission? Yes, you certainly do. Sharing group shots where people are not easily recognized is okay. Pictures from the back of the church, especially as you get into pictures of kids, you want to get their permission. And there's some great resources out there for like permission slips. One of the things we do at our school is at the beginning of the year we have everybody sign a social media, a video, photography release form that allows us to share those pictures. There's a lot of reasons why people may not want their photos shared. It could be from things within their family, their personal life, just could be uncomfortable with it. And so you don't want to risk upsetting somebody by sharing their picture on social media. So legally, there's some legal requirements there that I'm not qualified to speak on. But from an audience perspective, it's best to give them that say, and most people won't care. Some people will be a little uncomfortable with it. If you explain that, how it's being used, they're usually okay with it. But you certainly don't want to upset somebody by posting a picture on social media when they didn't want it, and so it's best to get their permission. And you could do that in a more blanket fashion, like saying, okay, starting up the school year at church, we're going to be doing some more on social media. We ask everybody to just sign a waiver saying it's okay to use their image. I don't know if we're going to use it or not, but at least we have that. The other thing you could do, you could take the reverse approach, take a bunch of pictures, take a bunch of video, and before you post it, ask the people in there if it's okay. So there's two strategies for it. And the important thing is you don't want to get somebody upset who didn't want their photo shared. So legally, there's some requirements that, like I said, I'm not qualified to speak on. I don't think in the church we have too many concerns because most people don't want to sue a church. But that's not a reason to not think about it and take proper precautions. So I definitely encourage you to do that. Mount Olive's got a couple of great questions here. What kind of posts should I use Facebook promotions on? Facebook ads? Boosting posts? Really, you can do it on anything. It comes down to Facebook algorithms, and we'll talk about that a little bit next week as we're talking about coming up in search. Part of just coming up is paying to play. Facebook pages get an engagement or a reach of about 10%, meaning if you have 100 fans of your page, people have liked your page, when you post something, it'll most likely show up in about 10 people's news feed. Now, depending on their interactions with your church, if they're constantly liking or sharing things, they're more likely to see it in their news feed. But organically speaking, meaning not paid, it's only about a 10% reach, which is very disappointing. It's dropped significantly over the years. Facebook ads allow you to put a few dollars behind it, and all of a sudden it starts showing up for people. It's that pay-to-play model, and it's and I understand why it is. It allows Facebook to prioritize what content people see, and so businesses are not able to just push and push and push content out to people. It's monitored through a bidding system, through the algorithms, and being able to use Facebook ads allows Facebook that opportunity to say, you really want your post to show? You're going to have to pay for it. We respect our audience's attention enough to not let you abuse it through, let an organization abuse it through constant posting. And they use this algorithm with individual posts too. They just give priorities to your friends and family. So I think any post should have the opportunity to have some ads behind it. You don't have to do that for everything. But especially things that you want to reach your audience with. If it's a big church-wide event and you want everybody to attend, putting a few dollars behind it is well worth it to get their attention. And then Mount Olive also asks, do you recommend creating a Twitter account even though it's not necessarily available for churches just to have a presence? I would say it depends on how much time you can spend on it. There's a lot of ways to automate things. There's if you have a strategy going in that every week we're going to share the sermon topic and today's Bible study topic, and each event, make it kind of just a way to disseminate events to your audience, that doesn't take up much time, and it certainly is valuable to those people who are on Twitter. So in that case, I'd say yes. Most importantly, and as you evaluate every network, determine, is my audience there, and is there enough attention there from my audience that it's worth my time? And I can't say that as a blanket statement. I can only say that as a general rule of when you should use these different platforms. Now, I definitely think you should be on Facebook. I think just about every audience is on Facebook to some extent, usually in a heavier extent of their time. So in that case, I would say be on Facebook. These other ones, it depends on your setting, on your church, and I'd love to talk to you about that in more detail. If you'd like to shoot me a note, tell me a little bit more about your church, I can make some recommendations. And that's all they would just be recommendations. So, all right, well, I've passed the hour mark. I've been doing very good at being under an hour these last few weeks. I've exceeded that amount. So let me go and put up my last thing. It's my contact information one last time. Thank you very much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. I greatly enjoy helping churches leverage technology for use in their ministry, and that's why we're doing this. So thank you once again for joining me. I hope that this was valuable for you, and with that, I'll say thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.